You know who Jimmy Smith is?
No. Do you take categorize for your practice time every day? For example, if there are like 4 hours for me to practice, what should I do? Do you design those things?
I'm not that disciplined. I'm a jazz guy, no discipline whatsoever. But I do try to organize my practice time. So I think, so I'll start off with the Chopin etudes I know, and then maybe I'll do the Prokofiev Sonata a little bit, and some of the Mendelssohn, some of the new Bach I'm working on, just to get my fingers going. But when I practice my jazz stuff or improvisational things, it's a shorter amount of time, and it's mostly when I do that practice, it's mental. It's not physical. So say, for example, if I'm learning, I'm just out reworking the standard Stella by Starlight. I don't know if you know that beautiful tune.
Yeah.
And I've always worked on it. I've always studied, but recently I've been restudying it and reworking things. And so just the new concepts on and how to play over it. And then when I practice that, it's very short amount of time of practice. And most of the time is fixing my mind. Like, how do I think about this harmony? How do I think about the voicings? How do I think about the lines that I play over this harmony? And then I may practice a little bit about those things, you know. And then, because once my theory is, and once the mind and the inner ear understands what to do, if you've done the technical work, then your fingers will do it. And I have students that come from the classical world, they're trying to do the jazz. They more or less learn what they need to play, and then they play that. So, but I'm trying to break them of it. I'm trying to get them to stop doing that and just think and hear, understand, and then force your fingers to do that, as opposed to learn like a classical piece. You have to learn. Of course, you didn't write it, so you have to play what Chopin wrote. And then you have other expressions you do. But with improvisation, there's nothing written, so you really have to create on the spot. So the mind and the inner ear and the heart and your soul and the universe has to be in control of the physical. And then you have a good possibility of actually creating something that's meaningful.
So the deliberate practice actually comes to the reason that we have to redefine our instincts. And then we have the spontaneity comes with thoughtful, with mindfulness.
And exactly, because if I'm on a gig, like when I'm going to play in a couple of weeks, a Bebop gig, they're very structured songs and they have the harmony at the structured. But when I start my improvisational part of it, or even when I'm just comping behind the other soloists, there's no set thing to do. I have to listen to what the soloist does and the drummer. And at that moment, I have to react to that. I can't say like, oh, yesterday I practiced this rhythm and this voicing, so I'm going to do, it may not be the right thing to do. What's happening, you know? And then when I start my solo, it has to start just from scratch. Because, you know, if I practiced it beforehand, the bass player and the drummer and the guitar player, they don't know what I practiced. So they're going to start doing something that they feel. So it's more of a group effort, and you have to create on the spot. So you really have to be, like you say, your instincts have to be really spontaneous and at the moment. And if you do something that you already practiced, then it kind of ruins it. And I think the audience knows this too, even if they're not musically trained. I think they understand when something's really created at that moment for them, or if it's worked out. They can, I think they can feel that.
There's a different efforts.
And even if things don't go right, so like if you go and you have like a little flub or something goes wrong, I've seen the audience where they love that.
They love that.
They like said, because you know this guy is going for it for me. At that moment, he's going to take the chance. And this is the other thing I learned from Alan. Every night we'd be on tour for like 6 weeks maybe, playing 6 nights a week. Every night, the whole band had this concept. We're just going to go to the edge. We're always going to walk on the edge. Sometimes we slip off, but we're going to be there, because why be safe and just do what we know? We're going to take it to the edge. And the people will just love it, you know. And if something kind of falls apart, they don't care. And that's what I learned. I'm like, but they know that that moment was special just for them, that live moment, you know. And I try to recreate that in some of my recordings the best I can. It's a different medium, but in my recordings I try to get the other musicians to think like that when they record. But
so I think you are accustomed to having note chart, to score readings with classical music, and to score lead sheets. So how are you able to adapt with all different situations in terms of just the score?
And this is the dilemma I'm teaching my students at Berkeley, because a lot of them don't understand it. So they can play a written score beautifully, musically or whatever, and maybe even in the right style. But you put up a lead sheet, which is just some simple melodic treble clef line, and then some letters with numbers after it. And then you say, okay, play something. And they're like, play what? I'm like, so if they don't know the harmony, if they don't know the chords, then okay, they have to do the work. If they don't know their scales, they have to do the work. But once you do the work of all the basics of how music works, then you can start being free with it. So I try to get them not to do because I'll play the tunes for them, and I'll try to get them to not play what I just played, because they can do that too, especially people with good ears. I noticed like people with perfect pitch, I found out that I would play the song for them, and they'd come back the next week and they could play it, almost like I played it. And then one week I didn't play it, and they were very nervous, and they came back the next week, they couldn't play. And so now I don't play for them too much, especially people with perfect pitch, because they just copy, and they're not thinking it through. So I always get them to think it through, to understand, and then feel free to do this or do that. You know, don't be afraid to try things and create. If it's bad and it falls apart, okay, you don't do that. But you have to do it. So this is, when I approach a lead sheet, I do the same thing. I'm like, here's the chords, here's the melody. Start playing, what can I create? This is different than the last time I played it. Or it's different than somebody else played it. You know, how can I approach it? And there's no really right or wrong, you know. I can play it in 5 different styles if I want. I can play it in 10 different tempos each time. It doesn't matter, right? It's just what I'm feeling at the moment, you know. It's hard.
So practice and then get the feelings, and then it's in your back of your mind.
Yeah.
And then when you have the lead sheet or with no lead sheet, you can just cue all those little like money from the bank, you know, and spend it out.
Well, and it's about pulling out the creativity in people. And I mean, I love classical music, and I have classical teachers now that I study with, and I love the whole genre. But I think they're very scared to be creative, because they have to wait for the teacher to tell them what to do a lot of times, you know. And then, and if they are creative, it's mostly about the feeling of the line or something. But in jazz music, it's just like, go for it, you know. If you have the knowledge, I mean, and you have so you do have to do the work.
Nerdy things.
Yeah.
But don't let those nerdy things to block the performances.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's always good to find a middle balance, and it's the most hardest part, but it's the most bliss point.
Like that impromptu thing I did. It's just, it's very free. I mean, most people wouldn't want to listen to that all the way through, because it's just me being expressive for 18 minutes. But there were the other, like Keith Jarrett used to do that. And I saw him when I was young, and I saw him play one of these. He just sits there, and he sits, and then he puts his hands up. He plays something, whatever it is, and then it goes. So I do that a lot on my own, and I think that kind of playing like really pulls out creativity in you. And then I can apply that to structure and to harmony.
I noticed you put a lot of the nature photos on that single. So I guess you viewing the nature differently. As I feel like we think it's harmonic, but you're thinking it's polyphonic probably.
What I'm learning now, like it's like the harmony and the sounds. I can play a sound that's very open, that has no dissonance. But sometimes I'll play that same sound and I'll put a little dissonance in the middle, and it just changes the whole character of it, you know. Like it changes the color of it, just putting that one note in it or taking the note away and stuff. I'm colorblind, so I'm not good with actual colors. But I think maybe what happened to me is those colors went into my musical side of the brain. And so when I hear a harmony structure, I think it creates that same brain wave that when people see colors. But I just see it musically. If I want like a very open sound, you know, it's one kind of color or texture for me. And if I want some dissonance in it, I'll put a little note in there, and then it just changes the whole thing. So and that's the way I think. It's hard to teach that to students, or it's hard to explain it. It's just, I know.
It's a personal feelings, but it turns out to be having a master and absolute control over the instruments.
Well, exactly. You have to know your instrument. You have to be technical ability to do it. And so I do this with my students. I'll tell them, just start playing anything. And they start something, and I do a duet with them. And it forces them to like listen to me, and I'll play something, and then they'll play it. I'm like, and then they realize, oh, we're going to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And we just play. There's no chart. There's no chords. They just play something. I play something, and then we start having a conversation. We do some crazy stuff maybe, or some free things, or textural things do that.
It's a very organic way of teaching.
And you can see them, and they're like, wow, I just created something, and they'll never be able to do that again because it's just for that moment, right? So it's right. So that part of teaching, I love doing that kind of teaching where I get them to think, to get out of that thing of like, oh, this is wrong, this is bad, you need to practice this, and they're just like, play something, that's good, play something else, I love that. And they're like, it really frees them out of this kind of box of
yeah, they should record the whole lesson.
Like I said, when I was a kid, and this was my music in the 70s, it was later called jazz fusion. I think at the time it was jazz guys they're trying to play rock and roll.
Rock, yeah.
So they didn't, those guys, they didn't want to play like the bebop stuff anymore. Like Miles Davis, he's like, I'm done with that. And so they started having distortion guitar or synthesizers. So I grew up in that era where synthesizer was just being created. And it was like fantastic. I remember as a kid, I went to this camp, and one of the counselors had a mini moog. And I'd never seen this before. And so when everybody else went on canoes and climbing trees or hiking, I would skip. And I went into the hall, and he had this moog with an amp, and I spent the whole day like just playing with it. It was fascinating. And then I got my own synthesizers during that decade when I was in high school, and the electronic keyboards, and I listened to that kind of music during that time. And so I never really thought about like what my path is going to be. It's just, this is what I love. I love this kind of music, and it's exciting, and that's what I want to do. So I came to Berkeley, and I just continued that. I did have to go back and learn the bebop and the jazz standards later. My dad was happy about that because I told him I didn't want to learn that.
That's how he grew up listening to.
I heard him playing all that stuff, and he'd take me to the concerts, and Frank Sinatra and Count Basie and all the great jazz. So I heard that, and he would play that in the house all the time. But I didn't think I'd ever do that, But eventually I realized, just like we go back to Bach, like always, you play Stravinsky or Bartok, but you still have to go back to Bach. And I realized as I got more mature, even though I'm a fusion, that's my main thing, I had to go back and learn Bud Powell and Thelonious Monk and Bill Evans and Art Tatum and J.P. Johnson and Louis Armstrong. And you have to keep going back. And I never really charted out my path. Like I never said like, in 10 years I want to do this, and I just kind of, sort of like improvisation, I just let it flow. Opportunities would come up and I would go do it. And then that's kind of, I'm more like, I guess like water. I just kind of flow where it's happening. And then I don't have any regrets or anything I wish I'd done different. It's just my life. This is where I went. And then every day, every month, every year in my music thing, it's a new adventure. I'm already working on a new record with some other musicians, and I have ideas about doing new stuff. And then I call them up, hey, you want to do this? And they're like, yeah. So we get together and do it. There's no like, big plan. Like I don't map it out. Like this is where I'm going to go. So I don't know. It's like, that's been my path. It may not be for everybody, but that's sort of the path I've taken. Just let things flow. And if it takes a little longer to get something going, what's a year or two? So some of my records have taken a long time to finish.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And sometimes if it takes a little longer, something will happen. Like one record I was doing, it was taking forever. And then Alan called me up. He goes, hey, he needed some work. He goes, do you have any projects that anybody wants me to play on? I'm like, actually I do. And so he wound up playing a couple of songs on this project I was doing. But if we rushed through it, then it wouldn't have that opportunity. So it was good that it took longer because he just happened to call me and say, hey, and now of course it's great with him on it. So it's a different way of thinking. But like I say, I have no discipline. There's zero discipline. I just go. see what happens.
I mean, in today's like algorithm-driven platforms, people always tend to rush for something like, okay,
Just
to get
deadlines.
this down, that
I have to get this
document.
done because the deadline's here, and I need to get famous. So if to get famous, I have to do this and I have to do that. And it's never been my mindset. I just let things flow. And when I look back on my career, I've done a lot of stuff that I've done enough stuff to make me happy. So I'm not hard on myself that I could have done more or whatever. I'm okay with it, whatever I did. And the integrity of what I did, I try to keep, the best I can.
I mean, as someone like you who has such a distinct artist voice from whole decades, do you think that it's becoming more difficult for the younger generations, as we said, to keeping these platforms of you have to be exposures to the TikTok and everything right now, whatever. How to balance the individual voice and keep the cultural identities and personal sounds?
I like the fact that things are different, and I talk to my students about that. It's like you live in a different world than I lived in, so you should grasp that and own it, and create your art around whatever world you're in. So when I grew up, it was not my dad's world, all of a sudden I had synthesizers and eventually computers, and it was such a new thing. And the older people thought like, oh, this is a drum machine. What are you going to do with a drum machine? It sounds terrible, But my generation loved it, and I loved it. I'm like, this is so cool. And so we create our art around where we're at the moment, So I encourage young people, like, know what your surroundings are, know what your culture is, and then create your art around that. If your culture is a 15-second TikTok thing, or Instagram or whatever it is, then I think that's good. And then just create your art around that, because I think at the moment we don't know what's going to be the longevity of what we're doing. That's for the future to tell, right? So I think even like Chopin and Liszt, they just did their thing. I don't think they were thinking like, in 100 years, everybody's going to be playing our music because we're great or we do some. I think they just did their thing, and then they had something special that broke through, and then it carried on through time. And it was the future generation that says, oh, these were the greats, and they put them up on a pedestal. So at the moment, I think students shouldn't worry about whether they're going to be famous in the future or whatever. Just do your art and your creativity at the moment with your surroundings, and I think they'll be fine. So I have a lot of faith in the young people, and that there's going to be new stuff. There always is, but old people complain about like, oh, they're not doing this, they're not doing. I try not to do that, because I lived through the same path, right?
You broke the rules.
Yeah, so maybe, I don't know. It's just harder for young people now, like with the social media, and to make it be successful, and to...
And the industry nowadays demands a musician with so many hats.
Yeah.
And do you think that each musician, not each, but then musician, it's essential to develop different skills, and probably need to become a pianist, and then also learn other instruments, develop your production skills, and recording skills even. I don't know.
Well, I think this started happening pretty quickly during my generation, and then the 80s and the 90s, it was pretty clear that I had to do multiple things. I think the previous generations, you could just be a performer and you could just play. That's all you had to do. Or if you just wanted to work in a studio and be a producer, you could just do that. Or if you just want to compose music, it was really separated, But by the time the 80s and the 90s came around, during my peak of time, I guess, that it was very clear that I had to do multiple things in order to survive, to make more money, to like do the things I wanted. And so I did it all. I was a performer, and then I also composer. I wanted to put out my very first record, which was From Your Heart and From Your Soul. I didn't have the money to go to a record company. No record company wanted me, and I couldn't get a producer. And so I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to do this on my own. So I got some loans together, and I built my own studio, and it was in my basement here in my house, and I built the whole thing. And that's how I did my first record, just on my own. Like, nobody else is gonna do it for me. I can't get a record deal, I'll just do my own. So I learned how to do recording on the spot, and I just did it there. And that's how my first record, and then other people heard it and they said, oh, you want to record my record too? I'm like, yeah, come on over. And so over the years, I've become a producer. I didn't set out to be a producer.
Oh, you learn by doing it.
Yeah, I had to learn on my own, and from my experience from the past of recording. And so I think, so then producing, and then now I have my own record company and my own studio, and I do my own producing, and I still go do gigs, and I still teach.
Yeah.
So I don't know, 5, 6 different things. And then I started going to, I went to China, did some master classes, and that was great to see a whole new part of the world really interested in the music that we do here, which was really great. And I was excited about that, and hopefully I'll go back soon and do some more of that.
Where are you going to in China?
Hopefully really soon I may be going to Beijing, which I haven't been to before. I've been to Shanghai and Xi'an and Xiamen and Zhuhai and Chengdu. I've been to a lot of places and Shanghai, and then I worked with the students there that are really interested in something that's new for them. And I see that spark in their eyes sometimes, like when I was a kid, they hear something maybe they hadn't been exposed to before. And then they're very excited, and I see that spark, and they want to learn. It's really exciting. Like when I went to Wuhan in 2018, and I had a class of students, and so I didn't know what their knowledge was of jazz, and it's kind of funny because I said, all right, how many people know Louis Armstrong? And it was silence. And I went through like a dozen jazz. I'm like, okay, how about Duke Ellington, Count Basie? It was just nothing. Miles Davis, Bill Evans, no. And I went, like they had no idea. Oh. And then I just finally said, how about Steve Hunt? And they're like, oh, we know Steve Hunt. I'm like, all right, you know your first jazz artist. So and then we had a great week of just talking about improvisation or the blues or whatever. And I still stay in contact with them to this day on WeChat, with people still trying to learn this music. It kind of comes from America. It's kind of an American culture. So to change all your colors and sounds, you have to really work with the drawbars. Yeah. You have to put vibrato on it, change your Leslie sound. And all your volume and expression is done from the foot, not the hand. So if you want a crescendo, you have to, so on piano, you have to think of the crescendo, you have to do it with your arm and hands and back. But here, if I want a crescendo up, decrescendo, and a swell, So your brain has to go not to here, but to there. Loud, soft, accent. It's a different mind thing, so different animal than the actual piano. And a lot of times they play the left-hand bass, so.
What is all this pedals? And
then the pedals are, if you want to play chords here, like so if I'm doing a ballad, like a. So I can play chords here, and then my feet can play the bass. Bass, I just want to be funky, you know.